Yeah. As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going. Better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH-LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everybody. And it's really such a pleasure to kind of be in contact with you. I was talking with some of our guests before we went online, and just to be alive, to know that we can share and help one another is so key. But let me not filibuster. Let's get right down to it. Today in the Tom Ficklin Show on Monday, May 10th, 2021, we're going to do an overview with in terms of autism and treatments and the discovery. And we're blessed to have people that have been involved with this, doing the research, the assessments, the diagnosis, the really putting their heart, mind, and soul in terms of what does autism mean. But not only what does it mean, but how can we kind of alleviate and treat and work on this path of discovery. So we have Yale researchers Leah Booth and Dr. Pamela Ventola are with us, along with Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton. We're going to discuss how, as I mentioned, how Yale is really literally pioneering, not just kind of Johnny come lately, but pioneering treatments and approaches to help children with autism, and for that matter, other developmental disorders. We're going to discuss new research, and that's going to be key. And I might kind of interrupt people just so we can make sure that we cover the new research and how people can participate in research. That aspect is so key for this show. But we're going to discuss new ways to help children overcome these anxieties that are kind of occurring during this time, and even prior to this time, that may limit their daily lives. And also parents, we're not going to forget about parents. How can we work directly? And I say we, in terms of the communal we. It's all of us are engaged in this endeavor. How can the communal we work directly with parents around their own concerns and roles? So as mentioned, our guests today are Dr. Pamela Ventola. Dr. Ventola is a clinical psychologist and associate professor at the Yale Child Study Center here in New Haven at the Yale School of Medicine. Leah Booth is with us as well, associate research scientist and speech language pathologist on the faculty at the Yale Child Study Center, Yale School of Medicine. And we're joined again by Reverend Dr. Leroy Odinka Perry Jr. Reverend Perry is a pastor of St. Stephen's AME Zion Church and a cultural ambassador to the very important and significant and seminal Yale Clinical Research Program, as well as Reverend Elvin Perry. Pastor Perry is the pastor of Walters Memorial AME Zion Church in Bridgeport, and also a cultural ambassador to the Yale's Clinical Research Program. Everybody, welcome. I'm tempted to say congregation welcome, but I'm outnumbered by the ministers on the show. So everybody, welcome to the Tom Ficklin Radio Show. And let's jump in. Dr. Ventola, we hear, according to the CDC, the prevalence of autism in the United States has been rising since almost forever. But I guess, for example, 2010, one of 25 children, and 2020, one of 54 children. Do we know is that true? And what's contributing to this increase?
Yeah, so definitely, it is true. And in some ways, we think of that as an unfortunate finding where, there's more children and individuals in the world with autism. But really, we don't have a one clear answer as to why we're seeing this increase in prevalence. It's likely multifaceted. One of the main drivers, though, that we hypothesize is what's increasing this prevalence is that as a field, we're getting better with our science and with our clinical care about identifying these children, identifying them earlier, and differentiating between what is autism and what is a learning disability, what might be anxiety, what might be an intellectual disability. Because years ago, decades ago, a lot of children who had developmental or intellectual delays just grouped together as that was their diagnosis. That was a category. And we've refined it. We've refined our clinical care and our science. And that one category, many of those children who historically would have been in this developmental delay category are now being identified as having autism instead. So that is one of the main drivers of this increase in prevalence.
Excellent. And Mrs. Booth, Dr. Ventola, I think, kind of referenced in terms of this wide spectrum of how we now kind of not to even choose words. I don't want to say categorize, but this wide spectrum of really examining the varieties of the human behavior. Can you tell us what that means? Because people will hear this term spectrum, and what does that denote?
It's interesting. Those of us in the field often say, if you know one child with autism, you know one child with autism. People with autism are as different from one another as any other people. And so it's really important, not only for clinicians, but for teachers, people in the community, parents, grandparents, et cetera, to recognize the fact that people with autism are individuals. There can be kids who are nonverbal and struggle with basic daily living skills, and there can be kids that are highly verbal and have great intellectual capacity and have different challenges. And so, really, what's required when you're dealing with a person who has autism is looking at that person as an individual, considering his or her strengths and needs in terms of learning and adaptive skills, and teaching that person in a way that makes sense to move him or her along his own developmental continuum.
And that's so helpful. And I just want to ask Dr. Ventola, as well as you, Mrs. Booth, and feel free to even contradict one another if you want, and just add on. But it's just we're trying to draw upon our collective wisdom. But is it true that health disparities exist across different racial and ethnic groups in terms of autism, regardless of how broadly we define it? And yeah, I mean, we hear about other similar disparities when it comes to the diagnosis of autism and access to therapeutic services. So this is kind of a jumbled mix of politics and social and commentary and political spectrum, but comment on that in terms of the impact of perhaps on racial equity.
Sure, I can take a pass at that, and then perhaps colleague Leah can jump in too. I think yes, short answer is yes. I think the disparities are real, and it's definitely something as a field we're working to address. When you look at the worldwide prevalence of autism from different countries, it's equivalent. So it's not that autism is more prevalent in one part of the world or in one culture than another. It really is quite evenly distributed. But where the disparities seem to arise is access to service. Mm-hmm. So there are later diagnoses in certain ethnic cultural groups, regional differences around access to getting that initial diagnosis, which is your ticket to treatment. Mm-hmm. So if you have a child that you have concerns about or have delays, until that's formally identified, you can't treat that. You don't know how to get connected to the services that can help the child until you know what's driving their delays. And that's where we see the major disparities.
Mrs. Booth?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think something that, having worked for many, many years in school districts and then in the private sector, one way that families access services is through the school district. And so very often a child comes out of birth to 3 or early intervention services, and then you're working to advocate for your child in the school district to help assure that that child gets the kind of interventions he or she needs to be educated. And I think something that's significant in terms of disparity is the aptitude of a family for interfacing with the special education system can have a great impact on the outcome for that child. It's a complicated system, the special education system. It has its own language, it has its own rules and principles. It often can be very daunting to go to a meeting in a school where you are the only person without the background and knowledge of their specific system. And so I think that there is disparity in terms of how comfortable people feel dealing with the special education system and making sure that their child gets the best services available under the special education law.
Excellent, excellent. Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton, it seems to me that Dr. Ventola and Mrs. Booth have talked about the aptitude / access / highway for open, knocking on that door, make sure it's open. But it seems to me that the cultural ambassadors have been involved really for the last, I don't want to put you guys on blast, but for more than a decade to be under the liaison in terms of opening those doors between medical professionals and marginalized communities. Why is this important in addressing some of the disparities that Leah and Pam have identified? Reverend Perry, if you'd like to start.
Tom, I think Dr. Booth has put the hammer to the nail. I think the access to services and how they are disproportionately not in favor of marginalized or minority populations is really the issue. Jeff Gruen, who did a study on dyslexia and language impairment associated with genetic markers, was really able to bring some clarity to our community with regards to minority youth who did not fare well in school, particularly by the time they were in the 3rd or 4th grade. I think if we have more knowledge, more access, more community involvement with marginalized populations with this regard, I think we could change outcomes of many of our students who suffer not only from autism, but from trauma, but we just do not have the education nor the educators to come in and volunteer, or a program in place where we can handle this. I mean, when we find out about it, I mean, parents, it's daunting for parents, as Dr. Booth said. And if you don't have anyone that you can turn to for this kind of assistance, then you're left in the dark with your child. So this program, I think today, and Tisha is the greatest advocate for what we're doing. This program today speaks volumes of where we need to go and how our ambassadors are working for trying to find some solutions to help fill the gaps here.
Excellent. And Reverend Clayton, and then Tisha, I would like you to comment briefly, but so your name is lifted up, and so just lift it up, you got to kind of grab it. But Reverend Clayton, let's hear from you.
This is awesome, and Dr. Ventola, excellent job, and colleague Reverend Perry have covered it thus far in a great manner. But I have to go back and say that education. Parents knew early on, or even before having the importance of seeking early treatment, early diagnosis that have this problem. They would be far better. What has happened, so many children get diagnosed very late in life or later on in their childhood. And when that child could have been helped at age 3 or 5 or something, sometimes it might be 10 or beyond. So we have to advocate for these children and help parents and educators and even physicians to understand the importance of early diagnosis for children with autism.
And Dr. Ventola, before I come to you, Tisha, please weigh in, because I see you smiling and your mind is, you have some wisdom there that I'd like for you to share.
Yeah, Reverend Perry is right. This is a topic that's very personal. I'm a mom of a child on the spectrum, and so I know firsthand all of the things that were just discussed, how hard it is to be that parent in the room. Even when you have the knowledge, you're coming from an emotional place as a parent, and so that makes it even harder to advocate. But it's a new language that you have to learn, and I think it's also hard to come from the point of view, although that you're the parent, to understand that you're an expert in your child, and that becomes a very important part of a partnership that you have to develop to be successful. So, so I think that this show is just incredible to get the information out to parents, because oftentimes you do feel this sort of powerless feeling at the beginning of the process that you don't know how to help your child in the best way. And having the knowledge and being able to understand how to interface with the school in a way and the language that's required to get the right services, it just becomes so important. And so I was thrilled to help the ambassadors and Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton find the experts at Yale who could help them get the message out. And So the show is one that's we're all very proud of and excited to be a part of.
Excellent. And Dr. Ventol, if we might, let's drill down even a little further on this early intervention from a research standpoint, and even in terms of positive outcomes that might occur if we do have some. Is there any research on like the benefits of early intervention, and if so, parents, what should they look out for, and what steps should they take if they have concerns about their child?
So early intervention is key. I mean, it really is the strongest predictor of positive outcome. Get involved intensively and early is what helps to lead, again, to the most positive outcome. I mean, first, I would even take it one step back as to what to look for. Like, what would make a parent concerned? And it does differ across the ages, but in a young child, say under 2, we really look to language. So a child typically starts to have emerging vocalizations and even a word by about 12 months, 15 months. We like to see children start to use single words. So book, ball, something simple words, but definitely starting to communicate their intent. And then by about 2, we like to see children who have some phrases where they're putting some words together, 2, 2.5. Every child develops differently. On who has autism, who doesn't have autism, they all develop differently. But generally speaking, these are some rules of thumb where we're looking for this language marker. Also looking for social engagement. So for our young children, this is little games like peekaboo or different interactions between the mom, the caregiver, the dad, family, grandparents, and the child, where they engage back and forth. There's also, however, so we often think of these really young children when we think of autism, though. There's also children who are in pre-K, kindergarten, where there might be more subtle delays. So parents said, oh, my child talked just fine, maybe a little late, but I wasn't really worried. But then when they get to school, there's children who didn't meet the threshold for concern at a very young age, but some concerns are arising. These often are having difficulty with the other kids. So where they're less interested or less successful, kind of engaging with the other kids in school, have trouble with the classroom routine. Sometimes the parents will hear that from teachers saying all the directions or is disorganized with their belongings. Those are the kinds of things parents should kind of keep an eye out for. So then if you have those concerns, so say you're a parent, you have these, even a little lingering, like maybe something's not quite right, I would act on it. I would recommend acting on it because parents, your child better than anyone else. And if there's something nagging at you that something's not quite right, go get it checked out. It could be completely fine, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Generally speaking, your first line is your child's doctor. So if it's your pediatrician, if it's a primary care clinic, whoever your child sees for your well visits, that's who I would contact first. And if that's not a good fit for you or doesn't feel like a good option, you also are very welcome to contact Yale Child Study Center on our website or give us a call. We have one main number that you call. Then it can connect you to a whole wealth of different providers. But there's just one point of contact to make it easier for families to get in touch with us. So those are my top 2 recommendations if you have these kinds of things.
Excellent. Well, David Letterman would be proud of you. I mean, it's a good list there. That's an old school joke, so not too many people might not get it. But at any rate, Mrs. Booth, tell us, because I mean, we can't lose light of make light of what's happened in the last 12 to 14 months in terms of this pandemic, worldwide pandemic. But many students are struggling. I'm sure you'd agree during this pandemic because they have in some form been. I mean, well, they've been disconnected. I've certainly been disconnected, but some people that have been disconnected from in-person learning. And I'm just curious, what challenges from your viewpoint do you think the children with developmental disorders, what have they been experiencing, feeling, trying to survive and stay afloat?
I think it's been incredibly difficult. I agree with you. I think it's been difficult for all learners, that I think those with developmental disabilities, including autism, have struggled precipitously from a lack of structure, lack of access to direct contact with other people, the ability to learn directly from peer modeling and modeling from adults. Kids with autism tend to thrive on structure, predictability, and routine. And I think I applaud. I think many school districts and teachers have worked double time to create systems so that kids have access to educational opportunities. But the reality is, for children with autism and developmental disabilities, they need that predictability, the structure, the routine. The in-person learning for them is fundamental. I think the other impact on these kids is the lack of social access. So kids who don't have social disabilities are better at getting online with the Xbox and connecting with peers, or getting online with Zoom. And kids with autism need facilitation to engage in and sustain peer interactions. And oftentimes there are carefully trained teachers and paraeducators who help to support those interactions day in and day out, with the positive outcome being the child learns to do it independently. But I think for all kids who have developmental disabilities, accessing other people has just been waylaid in a very significant way. I think the quicker we can get these kids back to school under more traditional circumstances, the better off they'll be.
Excellent. And Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, let me come to you, because we're weaving a few strands here about how the academic community, the medical community, the research community, but the community support is even a vital strand. I would say maybe even number one. And the cultural ambassadors particularly have been participating in, are going to participate in autism advocacy program, and you've been working with young people and creating support systems. So just tell us about, we hear this thing about the village. It sounds like sometimes it's so stereotypical, but we must maintain and sustain this village. So how are the cultural ambassadors kind of participate in this autism advocacy program now and in the future?
But Tom, can I go back just a bit for a moment?
Sure, Reverend. As long as you have your guitar, you want to play a little bit of some blues also?
Well, in the future, we may do that.
In the future, let's do it, because I need a new intro song, so keep that in mind.
Okay. But Dr. Ventola was talking about the behaviors that parents should look for. And when a parent discovers that the child is different or struggling in a certain area, are there anything that can assist the parent? You may go to a doctor, go to their physician, and discover that the insurance may not cover some of these type things. So are there any avenues that you may know that you could share with us?
Sure. So yes, it's so tricky navigating the whole insurance landscape, because it varies based on the kind of insurance you have, commercial insurance versus Husky, and I mean the iterations of it are infinite. So with that, some physicians' offices can help with that. I also would strongly recommend families who are struggling to find care to call the Child Study Center, because we do take a range of insurances. Another community option is the 211 hotline. They also have a lot of resources that can support families in navigating through that landscape, because it's as tricky, if not more so, honestly, than what Leah was talking about with the school situation and figuring out the educational vocabulary.
Reverend Clayton, I'm glad you mentioned that, because again, we got to eliminate any obstacles, perceived or real. Ms. Booth, you seem to you're raising your hand, please.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that the Connecticut Birth to 3 system is also an option for families that have children under 3. And so if you have developmental concerns about a young child, you can make a referral to Connecticut Birth to 3, and they will provide diagnostic evaluations and services, if warranted, to the family and in the home. And this can be a really nice way to service a child under the auspices of IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So it's part of our federal education system. And if you Google Connecticut Birth to 3, it's www.birth23.org. And that can be a very valuable system, both for early evaluation and intervention, as well as for helping the family to transition their child into the public school system for kindergarten.
Excellent. We're going to deal with research and treatment as well. And but I want to go back, Reverend Perry, Reverend Clayton, about this village concept. It's just not a word. It's just not a metaphor. It's really a structural need, a basic infrastructure that has to be sustained and magnified and solidified. So the cultural ambassadors have really been involved with this from a young period, and understanding the seminal importance.
Yeah, Tom, I think that one of the issues is the fact of having the funds and having the right people at the table. I mean, a person who has money can have they can have a psychologist, a psychiatrist, they can have mentors at these meetings when their child is being evaluated and a platform or a program is designed for them. There are many parents who are not able or as fortunate to have those kind of resources. And so at the table, I'm not sure that everything is equal. How do we change that? I think that's one of the things the ambassadors are seeking to do with the Yale Child Care Center and with our ambassadors in form of trying to develop a platform where this can be addressed. So as ambassadors, we have an outreach in the community. There is an apathy in the community when it comes to regards to the school system and minority populations. I mean, school systems don't really want to hear about trauma. They don't want to know that, there was gun violence or violence in your home. They when you come to school, they want to deal with you on a here and now basis only. But we know that there are other things that are affecting these young people. And we know that their parents don't make up the large majority of the PTA groups. So we have to find a way of empowering them. And we also have to find a way of helping them. And I think that's where we are. We don't have the solution right now, but we're working on it. And we're working together with other educators like you and Pam and Dr. Booth to come up with maybe a plan of action going forward.
Reverend Clayton?
I think my colleague said that very well.
He did say that very well, didn't he? He did. We're going to pass around the offering plate. No, that was really, really profound, really profound. And again, but it seems to me that Leah and Pam, you guys have been working in the school system, so we're not going to drag you throw you totally under the bus, but you have been working in schools in the past. But there's always ways to improve and do things better, and I think that's Dr. Perry's comment. So talk about the collaboration you've had with educators and students, and just working across school systems to ensure success. It's not a one-off. It'll only happen 24/7, 365 if we're just to have our laser-like focus on this goal.
You want me to take that one, Pam?
Take that hot potato. Cool it off a little bit, then you pass it on.
I mean, I go back to my original comment, which is that I think we need parents to feel empowered at the table in the school building. I absolutely love the idea that Reverend Perry is talking about, community groups that are helping parents to help themselves to advocate for their children. There is something called a PPT, which is a planning and placement team. And that is convened in a school district so that an IEP, an individualized education program, can be developed for a child. All kinds of people will be invited to a PPT, regular educators, special educators, PTs, OTs, speech, psychology. But what parents often, I think, lose track of in this mix is that they are an equal member of the PPT. There isn't an educator at the table who counts more or has more of a voice at that meeting. I think sometimes that fact gets lost in the shuffle. So the more we can empower parents to understand that they are an equal member of that team, I think the better the outcome we have for kids. I do believe school districts have the best of intentions for children. I've been in districts where people are absolutely keeping the child at the center of the table and working to use the resources and the training that they have to achieve the best outcomes for that child. So I wouldn't throw school teams under the bus. I've been impressed by them over and over again. But I think the reality is, if it is a parent, that child is their most precious thing. And so there is going to be difficulty and conflict as school districts and parents try to sort out programming and opportunities for the child. I think it takes a village. I think the more community members that can support that parent in helping them to negotiate the school, not because the school is doing the wrong thing per se, but because it is a complicated, difficult situation, the better off everybody will be.
Excellent. Dr. Fantola, was that your dog wanting to, whose dog wants to kind of share? Yeah, okay. I know Yale has I think a department that kind of analyzes that behavior, so we'll have them on the show teaching next time. But Dr. Ventola?
Sure. No, I absolutely agree with my colleague Leah. Parents, again, like I said before, they know their child best of all. So at that table, you have a child with special needs, you have one of these meetings. I don't think it can be overstated at how intimidating that can be. And just, parents to feel as comfortable and as confident as possible in that they are the expert in their child and they have every legal right as well as just empowerment to speak up on behalf of their child. I think one sort of in a similar vein, again, this can be hard and intimidating, but from a legal standpoint, parents have the right to request one of these team meetings whenever they think it is needed. So they can communicate with their school, usually asked in writing, so an email or written note requesting one of these meetings, but they have a concern about their child, they can request the team to come together to help problem solve as often as is needed. And just having the confidence or to work with their community partners to also know this, that they have a concern, call a meeting, we can work to do it together, be really helpful for the child.
We're going to jump to research in a second, and because I don't want to rush over the research and treatment and give people a sound idea and specific idea that how we can move together collectively. But I just wanted to throw out one more question in terms of the academic environment and the school system environment. We hear this term "new normal" so much, and it really frustrates me. But I was wondering, Dr. Ventola, as students and families look to adjust to a better normal, let's say, what are some important things for parents to keep in mind for students and when I say each grade level, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have time to go through elementary school to graduation to college and high school, but there are various grade levels where parents need to be on the lookout for indicators that might be contributing to people having a rough time.
Sure. As you said that, I'm like, what is our new normal? I mean, I think that is constantly changing. Where we were 6 months ago is different than where we are now. And I think that sort of speaks to my answer in that we are just in a state of transition and flux. And transitions are hard for people with autism. And the world is rapidly changing in big ways right now from a student's perspective. We might be in school some days a week. We might be in school half a day a week. We might be at home because the class has been quarantined or the school is still online, or we might have gone from online learning to full in-person learning. I mean, this is across all grade levels, college included. There's tremendous amounts of rapid changes. And I think we need to be forgiving. I think we need to be understanding and forgiving as much as possible of the student. This is hard. This is harder. This is hard on everyone, and it's harder when you have autism. So we might be dealing with more behavior problems than normal, more resistance to school than normal, and talking with your community, talking with your school around these problems and trying to problem solve them, acknowledging they're happening and then trying to problem solve them. But I do think we need to have a broader range of what sort of is we're expecting. It's also been quite isolating for families and for the children. So it's been a tough time. I'm optimistic we're moving in the right direction. I think children with autism need structure, they need predictability, and they need routine. Schools are actually the best place to provide that. That is not a fair request to put on families. Families are moving systems. They're constantly changing. They have many parts and dynamics, and to keep things consistent and structured and routine all the time is not realistic. But a school can. They can have a schedule, very structured. So I would encourage families to, as much as they feel comfortable, have their child in school and have this structure as much as they possibly can.
Before we move, and I really appreciate your sharing that, before we move to treatments and trials and participation, Tisha, I wonder if you might want to share, wade into this rich discussion of realism, but also perspective. I call it realism and unity, and how we're going to unify and solve these problems together.
I agree 100%. And I was just going to weigh in on from the ambassador's point of view. One of the things that I've shared is just on my personal journey is how hard it is to remember as the mom that you're that equal member, and it is, again, it doesn't matter. I remind my child who's taller than I am now that no matter how tall he gets, he's still my baby. And so it's hard to be in that emotional place, even when you have the knowledge, but to get the knowledge is so difficult. And I do, at least my experience has been the school system has been wonderful and has supported me as a mom and as a parent. But I think, you had asked earlier about the role of the ambassadors. I've watched the ambassadors in wonder for more than a decade, and I've watched the energy and the passion that they bring to everything that they do. And so when we had this conversation, and Leah and Pam shared, a role that a community leader might play in just, helping to educate parents, helping to get the word out about early diagnosis and treatment, and even helping to get the word out, even if your child is older and they still haven't been diagnosed, what are the things that can be done? And so I do think that the ambassadors could play just such a vital role in in that educational awareness and helping to understand really how, if your child has these special needs, how you as a parent can come together with the school system to enable success. And what do you need to do? What do you need to know? Who do you need to have in your corner to enable all of those things so that your child can be successful? And how you can play that vital, crucial, equal partner role. And that's where really I think the ambassadors, I'm going to be excited to see where we go over the next few months as we develop this plan, but I think we're very excited about it. And this show is, kind of the first step in just saying, here are some of the issues, trying to get the awareness out, but what is it that the community can do to support parents and children who are in need of this education and in need of this partnership so that we can really begin to change things.
Excellent. Let's spend pretty much perhaps the remainder of the time on treatment and research and clinical trials and just community holding hands together. But Dr. Ventola, the Yale Child, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Yale Child Study Center conducts research for really, I would think, on some innovative treatments that are happening, and from the current study standpoint, that are focused on autism and other developmental disorders. Share with us. I think we kind of we go to sleep on people are working to solve this problem. Talk to us.
We are working very hard actually on it, and there's lots of different research studies along the lines you said of clinical trials. So I think first let me define a clinical trial, because we throw this vocabulary around, and I don't sometimes I'm not sure if everyone understands. So I want to tell you what I think is a
Sure.
clinical trial. So when I say clinical trial, I mean, what we're doing in our research is trying to determine if a treatment works and then who it works for. Because there are certain treatments for autism that will work for some people and they won't work for others, whether it's age, symptoms, if you have irritability. Some people with autism have heightened irritability. It comes across as having some behavior problems often, whereas other people with autism are pretty even keeled. I mean, as different as people without autism.
Right.
There's a higher likelihood of anxiety in people with autism than in the typical population. So we also have treatments that are, designed for people with autism. So the clinical trial, though, we aim to determine if a treatment is working and then again, who it's working for. So we enter this study with a really good idea that we think this treatment will work. We have science behind it saying there's a high likelihood that this will work, but we don't know. So we need to get a group of people, of patients together and try it to see who it works for and how well it works. So with that being said, we have a variety of different clinical trials going on at the Child Study Center. Some involve new medications. So they're called drug trials. So there might be a pharmaceutical company that's developing a new drug and they want to know if that works for a symptom of autism, whether it's anxiety, irritability, social skills. There's different symptoms the drug might target. We have those kinds of studies. We also have a variety of studies that use behavioral treatments. And what that means is that we're teaching children and adults, actually, very importantly, this is for across the ages, teaching them a new skill, like very deliberately. So to use anxiety as an example, we have trials going with an approach called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's abbreviated CBT. And with a CBT approach, we teach the individual to recognize in their own body when they be feeling anxious, like what those signs feel like in your body. And then when you feel those signs in your body, what are some skills you can employ? So can you take a deep breath? Can you count to 10? Can you think about, so say this worry were to happen, have this worry. What would then happen? You're kind of going across that path and look, everything's still okay. Or like, what's the likelihood of this really bad happening? It's very, very low. And so employing those kind of skills helps reduce the anxiety.
I can come over and sign up in 10 minutes because you've been describing me. I don't think I might do people in their 70s get diagnosed, but I digress. I'm sorry, guys. But I thought you were talking to me. We're live. Continue, please continue.
Absolutely. But those are the kinds of skills. So sometimes people, I just wanted to make sure we were clear that sometimes people think clinical trials and they think drug. Sure. And that's one kind. But we also have clinical trials where we're treating a symptom by teaching the individual new skills that they might not have. You have to learn these things. These aren't implicit. Don't come naturally, and particularly not when you have autism. So that's the range of studies. And just also to mention, we have studies for treatment starting with pre-K, kind of young children, about age 4 up through adults. So, there's a variety of different kinds of studies across the ages.
And Mrs. Booth, I mean, they say when you assume things, something can happen. So we don't want to assume. I'm assuming these research opportunities are open, but talk to us about that, because I think people need to know we need everyone to kind of understand the benefit of this.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about a treatment, it's very possible that a family can get access to a treatment that's difficult to obtain through insurance or through other means. So there can be some benefit for the family through that method. The answer is, right, our treatments are open. And so if you call the one number for the Yale Child Study Center and you say you're interested in finding out about clinical trials that might be available for your child or your adult, given their age and their disability, there are people that are ready to talk to you about your interests, your child's needs, and what might be a good fit in terms of a research program that's happening at the center. So yes, absolutely, families are, welcome, encouraged to call the Child Study Center and ask, is there a research protocol that might be appropriate for our family? That's what we're there for.
Good. And Reverend Perry, I see you jotting down some notes as you typically do, with your mind kind of working feverishly, but in a very positive way. So I'm gonna call upon you.
I guess I'm concerned about the minority population in these studies. Are they recruited? Are they have access to the information, or are they expected to go online and just find this? I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is like bring this information to the community so that they can have a choice about their health and the health of their children. So, I don't know how many minority people are in these studies. It seems like they've been going on for a while. Do you have a kind of mix, Dr. Booth, of clientele? And the other thing is, I read that more boys than girls have autism, and so is it more male than female?
Well, as far as the demographics of the various research studies, I'm sorry, I don't have that information off the top of my head. Certainly, if you were interested in that information and you did get in touch with the center, I'm sure it would be available to you. I don't know, Dr. Ventola, do you have more information that you could share about specific protocols?
I can take that one. The studies are listed on yalestudies.org. So if you go there and you just check the disorder, the specific disorder that you're interested in, the available studies are there. If an individual has MyChart, they can go into their MyChart portal and click on the research tab, and the studies are also listed there. Or if they're interested in being considered for a specific study, they can complete a profile, and the parents can do it on behalf of their children as well through proxy accounts, but they can complete a profile and select the specific study area that you're interested in, whether it be autism or any other disorder, and they will be contacted about research participation. We don't have the numbers globally on Yale, the participants across the areas of autism today, but we can get those for you, Reverend Perry, so we can have a look on where we stand across the board. And then just to separate the research from the treatment for just a moment, all of those study resources can be found on the regular Yale Clinical Trials website. But for the child study, just to give the contact number, it's 203-785-2540 is the main number of the Child Study Center. And so there could be, you can call there, you can ask about specific studies, or you can ask about treatment. But the yalestudies.org and the website that we always give on the show does have research information about the studies that are ongoing at the Child Study Center as well, and in these populations.
And Tisha, and the reason I think that's important is because I think we need to know whether or not participation is low in this area, and maybe why it's low, and then see what we can do to change those numbers.
I agree, and I think that that's part of maybe the plan that we work on in the coming weeks, is to look at not only this area of advocacy, but also what we can do to promote the research in the Child Study Center and make sure that we have the same diverse representation in these clinical trials that we have in the other trials. It's very important that all of the clinical trials be diverse and reflect the our population and also the incidence of the disease. So I think it's a fundamental area, and one that we would it would be wonderful to have the ambassadors think about and help us make sure that we have diverse participation in.
we have, unfortunately, we have only about 5 more minutes, and Harry will play the music. But again, we're just, this is, Tisha, this is part one. This is part one on this topic, and maybe part of 3 or 4. I mean, honestly, but just, I want to give everybody maybe a minute or so for last words, and particularly around the context. Some folks may have known from an awareness standpoint that April was Autism Month, but every month is taking charge of your health month, is let's be healthy. Let's charge yourself and deputize yourself and others to this health quest. But April was Autism Month, but again, we're in May, but it doesn't matter. This is a 24/7, 365 endeavor. So I want to kind of go around and give everybody a chance for a minute or so to kind of talk about some things the community might be able to do to promote awareness and acceptance for individuals diagnosed with autism. And we're one community. We have the academic community, the medical community, the community, but we're in one way, we're all community. So this is a general question for Dr. Ventola and Mrs. Booth and Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton. What can we do to promote awareness and acceptance for individuals, and acceptance and support, and even maybe even get rid of this, negative term? We're all individuals. So, Dr. Ventola, if you'd like to start with your last, now 45 seconds rather than a minute.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think you're doing it. I think we're doing it right here. The more we talk about it, the more people we bring together with the idea that this is not stigma. So you have a child with a disability. Sometimes families feel hesitant to go out in the community or to label it, or have people see a tantrum or unusual behaviors. Sometimes people with autism have some unusual behaviors or different ways of interacting with others. But just having events like this, discussions, conversations, so people have an understanding that there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing, this is who this individual is, and they can come to church, they can go, into the community. And the more the people around the individuals with autism understand that this is autism, that's what that is. That's all that it is. I think that the more everyone will be comfortable and, feel less stigma around the disability.
Excellent. Mrs. Booth?
I think it's important to remember that autism is often a hidden disability, and parents struggle and children struggle. And so my wish for a community is to always assume everybody is doing their best. And if you see a child who's experiencing atypical behaviors or even very difficult behaviors publicly, rather than judging the parenting skills or wondering what's wrong, ask what you can do to help, and assume maybe there's more going on for that child and that family than meets the eye. I think the more people can sort of think about, how can I help? How can I embrace this person? The better off the families will be.
Yeah, amen. Reverend Clayton?
I think it's important that we drive the fact that the parents are the experts when it comes to their own child, and also let them know that there is help in the school system for their children.
Reverend Perry?
Yeah, I'm not sure who's the expert, but I do know that there is a problem. And I'm glad that Jackie's online with us, because Jackie worked in the Waterbury school system, and she really worked with young people who have been labeled dysfunctional and other labels. And I think, getting it right is important. And so having someone who has worked in the school system is going to be important for us in this project going forward. And also to be able to bring about a certain amount of equity, so that regardless of your color or your financial background, you are entitled to certain services. And those services, if you don't know about them, you may not be able to avail yourself of them. So what we're going to do is, I think in this project, is to empower and enlighten and to build a platform where we can work with this disparity on many different levels until we get it right.
Absolutely. Tisha, please. It's good to see you. Thanks for your support. But take us out, as they say.
No, this has just been an incredible show. I thank Leah and Pam from the Child Studies Center, and thank the ambassadors for everything that they have done and that they plan to do in this area. I think it's going to be wonderful to to put together a plan and come back on the show. As you said, this is part one of many to come, thinking about how we get this message out. And thank you, Tom, for having us and for the topic today.
My pleasure. Harry, give me a break. That's it. I knew it. There he is.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going. Better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go.